Hey there! Apple announced in the beginning of June that it will be changing the language in which iOS apps are developed. Instead of using Objective-C, which has been the standard for I think well over 20 years, Apple has introduced Swift as the new programming language for developing iOS apps. Now, if you're not familiar with Swift, don't worry, no one else is, unless you're the guy who wrote it, which makes it a perfect time to get on the Swift bandwagon and learn along with the rest of us. To use Swift, you can download the latest version of Xcode, which is going to be Xcode 6. Since this is currently in beta mode as of this recording and not available to the general public, you do need to have a developer's account from Apple in order to download it. If you want to wait till the public version of Xcode is out, you won't need an account. But you will need to have one if you want to publish your apps to the Apple App Store or to test your apps on actual iOS devices like an iPhone or an iPad. The developer's account will cost you $99 a year, so the decision is up to you. Now, I have already downloaded Xcode 6, but if you want to go ahead and do so, all you need to do is go to developer.apple.com. So let's get back to that. And go up to Member Center. Now, once you're in Member Center, you will be prompted to log in or to register. Now, since I'm already a developer and I've previously logged in, it automatically will take me to this screen. So you will have the option to either, if you are a developer, fill in your credentials, your password, and etc. If you're not, you'll also have the opportunity to register. So once you do that, you'll get to this screen. Go into Technical Resources and Tools. You're going to click on iOS. And you're going to have the option to click on iOS 7 or iOS 8 Beta 2. This is what we want, the iOS 8 Beta 2. Scroll down to the bottom, and here you will see Xcode 6 Beta 2 with the download link. Now go ahead and download that. Follow the directions for installation. Now they're pretty straightforward and you shouldn't have any problems installing it. Now that you have Xcode 6 installed, it's time to start rolling up our sleeves and diving into some Swift programming languages. So, let's start by opening up Xcode, and we're going to click on the Get Started with Playground tab. Okay, so click on that. Let's name it. We can just call it My Playground, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. This will be easy to find next time I need it. And hit Create. We can begin by erasing the preloaded content so that we can start with a blank slate. So just highlight it and hit Delete. Now let's begin by talking about variables and constants. If you have a background in other programming languages, this may seem very familiar to you. But if not, then we can start by talking about how these two things can help us in our app development projects. So basically, constants and variables assign a name to a value of a particular type, such as let number of months in year equal 12. Now this is a constant, and all constants will start with the word let. And as you can see, the number of months in year will never change. It's always going to be 12. And in variable, those start with the word var, V-A-R, number of sunny days in June, and let's set that equal to 19. Because we don't know how many sunny days were in June, I'm just guessing, but that can always vary. Now, the main key difference between a constant and a variable is, you guessed it, a constant cannot be changed once it is declared, therefore its value will remain constant. And a variable can be changed later on in the program, therefore its value can vary. So far, so good? Okay, for example, in our playground, let's type in a few lines of code. Remember, we start off declaring a constant by using the word let. So, let number of eggs in dozen equal to 12. Because that's how many are in a dozen, 12. Whether it's a dozen eggs or donuts or whatever, it's always going to be 12. This code can be read as declare a new constant called number of eggs in dozen and give it a value of 12. Now let's look at a variable. Again, we start off declaring a variable by using the word var. And so var number of eggs in omelet is equal to 3. Now, obviously this can vary depending on how hungry you are. So there can be 1 egg or more than 3 depending on how hungry you are. Therefore, we will use the variable assignment. This line of code can be read as declare a new variable with the name number of eggs in omelet and give it a value of 3. So to recap, if a stored value in your code needs to change, then declare it as a variable. And when a stored value in your code does not need to ever change, then declare it as a constant. Now let's move on to types of variables and constants. Every value that you assign to a constant or a variable is going to be of a certain type. It can be of type string, which is some text, of type int, which is a whole number, or of type float, that is also for numbers but with some decimal points, of type double, which has more precise decimal place for larger numbers, and of type tuples, which is a collection of types. So, let's take our previous example a little further. We can write a constant with more detail by using something called type annotation. And this is written this way. So let's delete this, and we'll write it again as let number of eggs in dozen, which is the name of our constant, of type, which is determined by a colon, int, so it's of type integer, equals 12. Now this can be read as declare a constant called number of eggs in dozen that is of type int and give it a value of 12. And with the variable, let's change things up a bit so that we're using the string type. So var breakfast special of type, using my colon, string, and we're going to give that a value of Western omelet. I think I must be hungry. Now this would be read as declare a variable with the name breakfast special that is of type string and give it a value equal to Western omelet. So how does Swift know what type you're using when you're declaring a variable or constant without the type annotation? Well, Swift can infer the type when you declare a value to a variable or a constant. So, for instance, let me just give you an example. Suppose we were to say var number of apples, and we set that equal to set that equal to 4. Swift infers that you're assigning an int type because you've declared it already as a number, and you can see it over here written at 4. The compiler is already reading it at 4. All right. Now, things can get more complicated as your coding progresses, so it can be very useful to use type annotation, which is this colon of type string or colon of type int, to let Swift know without a doubt what type of value you are assigning. In the next lecture, we will get into more with the types of int and strings a little bit more in depth. And we're also going to learn to print these variables and constants out to the console. Printing information out to the console is very useful in helping determine if our code is running properly as we're working on it. This way we aren't wasting a lot of time debugging when we can check our work as we're going along. So, sit back, digest what we've just learned in this lecture, and I will see you in the next one.